welcome to Love and Life's Journey. I'm Chantel. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today I have 3 DIYs for you that are very easy and very budget friendly. So let's just jump right in and get started. For this project, I will be using this unfinished wood frame that I picked up at Hobby Lobby. It was regularly $5.99, but I did get it on a 40% off sale, and so it cost about $3.50. If you can't find a frame like this, then you could use one similar to this one that I saw at Dollar Tree just this last week. I will also be using a few of these tumbling tower blocks from Dollar Tree, as well as one of these wood planks. These are the longer ones, and I will be using just one of those. I'm going to start out by painting my wood frame with some Waverly chalk paint in the color ink. It's just a black paint. You can use any craft paint for this, and you could paint it in any color that you like. I'm kind of going for more of a kind of chalkboard look, so that's why I chose this. And I would recommend painting the sides and even inside the back now at this stage. I didn't do it, and I wish that I would have, and you'll see why in a minute. So I'm going to be building a little box on the back. So I'm taking 3 of the tumbling tower blocks and I'm just gluing them one on top of the other, so I just have a stack of 3 blocks. Then I'm going to measure over and glue this stack of blocks down onto the back side of the frame, and I'm measuring so that I have enough space to put a 3.5-inch size cards or pictures into this because it's going to be like a little storage space for some pictures or cards that I'm going to be putting in the picture frame part. And if that sounds confusing, it will all come together and make sense in just a minute. So I'm measuring my wood plank, and I'm making it about 4 3/4 inches. And I'm just going to cut that down so that it fits nicely on the back to make my little box. I'm just using this miter box and saw. I do have the link to this in the description box below, and you can check that out. This is a great tool to have for crafting. Then I'm going to take a piece of sandpaper and just smooth down that cut edge so there's no splinters and it's nice and smooth. So I do again recommend painting the back of the frame before you glue your box pieces in. It will make it so much easier. But I glued down the little stack of tumbling tower blocks after I marked where it needed to go. And then I glued the little wood plank on top of that around the edge and secured that. And you just want to make sure that it is flush on the bottom so that your picture frame is going to stand up and not be wobbly. Then I went ahead and painted the back side of the frame. Like I said, this would be much easier to do before you put the box on, and then you could just paint the box part. So I actually got the inspiration for this from this picture that I had seen on Pinterest, I think, and it was just a block of wood with this verse of the week painted on it, and then it had a wire little picture holder that was on the top, and they put a scripture verse in it. So I just printed off the picture of this that says verse of the week, and then I went ahead and used this as my pattern. If you have a Cricut or a Silhouette, you could use that to put your lettering on, but I did want to show how you could do it if you do not have a die cutting machine. So since I'm going to be putting this on a black background, I'm going to take a white piece of chalk. This is just regular chalkboard chalk, and I am going to rub this all on the back of my pattern or my design that I printed out. Then I'm going to place that on my project right where I want it, and then I'm going to use a pencil and just trace over the letters, and then that will transfer the chalk onto my frame so that I can follow that to paint my letters on. Now I know you'll probably be asking me for these designs, but because these are not my personal ones, they're just ones I found online, I don't feel like I can provide those for you, but you can certainly go online, Google verse of the week images, and find all kinds of designs and choose one that you like. So instead of painting my design by hand with a paintbrush, I decided to try these Arteza acrylic paint markers, and I'm just testing it here to make sure that I can do a fairly thin line with this, and it looks like it's going to work great. So I am using that paint marker to paint the lettering, and I love how easy this was using the paint marker. I did have to go over it a couple of times just to fill it all in nicely, but in the end it was really easy and turned out really nice. I will put the link to those Arteza markers in the description box below. I've used them in quite a few projects and I really like them. And I did decide to add on just a little bit of an embellishment on the top and the bottom of my lettering, and I think this just really finishes it off. So after the paint is completely dry, then I'm going to take a little bit of white chalk paint on a dry brush, and I'm just going to add a little bit of dry brushing all around this project, all on the edges, the corners, and then across the top and the front a little bit more, just to give it a little bit more of that chalkboard look. So for my scripture verses, I went online. I just looked for some really pretty graphics, some designs that were already put together. Again, these are not my images, so I don't feel like I can provide them for you. I'm just using them for personal use. And so I printed 4 out to a page, so they're 3.5 by 5 because that's the size of the picture frame, and then I'm just trimming them all down with my trimmer. So then I'll put the glass back in my picture frame, insert my scripture verse, and then add the backing on, and that's all there is to it. And all of the rest of the 51 scripture verses, for one for each week, will be stored in that little box that's in the back of the frame. I think this would make such a wonderful gift to give to someone. In fact, I actually have made one and given it as a gift. So you could embellish it, paint it any style, any way that you wanted. I just kind of kept it simple, made it look like a chalkboard, but I really am pleased with how this project came out. So this video is part of a collaboration with some other amazing YouTube creators, and this is the In His Name collab. It's hosted by Leanie at Crafty Leanie and Nadia at DIY with Nadia. The playlist is in the description box below, so be sure to click on that link and go watch all of the amazing projects that these creators are putting in that playlist today. So for my next project, I will be using 6 of these large paint stir sticks. I picked mine up from Walmart, but you can get them at any home improvement store as well. I'm also going to be using this wooden light up cross that I picked up at Dollar Tree. And you could use regular stain for this. I am going to be using some acrylic brown craft paint. This is just a cheap acrylic paint, and I'm going to water it down to make it like a stain. I like to do that just because I think it's a little cleaner and easier to work with. I'm also going to be using some wood glue and some of this thin jute twine. And I'm going to be using some of that Crafter's Square vinyl for my Cricut. First I'm going to lay out my paint stir sticks, and I'm going to measure and mark where I want to cut them off because I want to cut off those narrow ends, and so I am going to cut mine off at about 14 inches. Once again, I'm going to use my miter box, and I know everybody always tells me there's a lip on the bottom of your miter box to put over the edge of your table so it doesn't slide around, but mine does not have that. So I'm using some of this shelf liner from Dollar Tree to put under my box, and that really helps keep it from sliding around. So I'm going to cut all 6 of my paint stir sticks off where I marked them at the 14-inch mark. Then I'm going to sand off those rough edges and any little splinters. I laid my sticks out on a piece of poster board because I don't want the wood glue getting on my table, and so I'm going to add just a little bit of wood glue in between the sticks and glue them together, and I'm going to make sure to wipe off any excess glue that's coming out because I don't want that to show, so make sure you get that wiped off before it starts to dry. And as you can see, I'm just randomly staggering mine so that my edges don't line up, and I think that just gives the sign more interest. And now that I have them all glued together, I'm going to put a couple of heavy books on them and allow them to dry for about an hour before I continue on. Once the glue's had a chance to dry, I pulled it off of the poster board. It was stuck on a little bit, so there's a little bit of that on the back of the sign. I just took a piece of sandpaper and kind of sanded off some of the larger pieces, but it is the back of the sign, so it's not that big of a deal. And I decided I wanted to give it a little bit more stability, so I added these craft sticks. I'm just gluing them staggered on the back to help keep everything together. Next, I'm going to take my brown craft paint and I'm going to water it down, and then I am going to paint my entire sign using that. And as you can see, it's watered down so it shows the grain of the wood and it looks just like a stain. It's so much easier to clean up and work with, so that's why I like to use this instead of actual stain. Next, I'm going to take that little light up wooden cross from Dollar Tree, and while the light is cute, I don't want it for this project. So I am going to take it apart carefully, and I'm just going to be using the front part of this cross. Then I went on my Cricut design space and I found this free design that says more faith, less fear. And I just used my Dollar Tree Crafter's Square vinyl and I cut this out. If you don't have a die cutting machine, you can use that same technique that I used on that previous Verse of the Week project and add your lettering that way. There are also some nice wall sticker designs that you might be able to find at Dollar Tree to use for a project like this as well. Next, I'm going to add these foam double-sided stickers to the back of the cross, and I believe I did pick these up at Dollar Tree, and so they are going to kind of raise the cross up off of the sign a little bit and give it more dimension, and that way it just kind of looks like it's popping up off of the sign. Next, I'm going to take my twine and I'm going to attach it on the back side of the sign at the bottom, and then wrap it around that bottom paint stir stick about 3 times, and I'm just kind of crisscrossing it a little bit, not really doing a pattern or anything, just kind of randomly, and then securing the end and cutting it off, and then I'll do the same thing on the top of the sign. Next, I'm going to make a twine flower, and I actually learned how to do these from Kelly Barlow on her channel, Kelly Barlow Creations. I will put a link to her channel in the description box below. She is a crafter who had inspired me to start my YouTube channel, and so I love to give her credit whenever I can. So be sure to check her channel out and subscribe if you're not subscribed. So to make the flower, I'm just wrapping the twine around 3 fingers about 6 times and then tying it off in the center. And then I'm going to repeat that 2 more times so that I have 3 little bundles. Then I'm going to glue one bundle on top of another one a little bit at an angle, and then I will glue the third one on top, filling in so that it looks like a flower. And then I'm going to glue my flower on the top right hand corner of my sign. Then I decided I wanted a little bit more embellishment, so I'm digging through my grandmother's buttons, and there are all kinds in here, but I did find a couple that I thought would look nice, and so I'm going to add those to my sign. I found 2 that were the same, and so I thought I would add one to the center of the cross and one to the center of the flower. And I glued the one on the flower, and then I decided I didn't really like the way that it looked with both of them on there, and so I ended up taking the one off of the flower and just putting that button in the center of the cross because I wanted the cross to be more of the focal point instead of the flower. I did still want something in the center of the flower though, so I found just a little tiny kind of brown button that finished it off but was not quite as obvious. And then to finish it off, I took a piece of nautical rope from Dollar Tree and just glued that on the back to make a hanger for my sign. Here is my finished sign, and I really like how this turned out. I wasn't loving it at first, but I really am pleased with it now that it's finished. If you have not subscribed to my channel, I would love to have you stick around. I have several more collaborations this month, and next month I am part of the Heidi Somble Creative Champion Contest, so there are going to be lots of DIYs coming, so make sure you're subscribed. This next project is one that I actually did on my channel a couple of years ago when I was first starting out. It is a prayer board, and I thought it fit in with this theme so well, so I wanted to include it. Something special I did with this is when the prayer requests are answered, then you can take those answered prayers off of the board And I have a little slit in the top, and you just slide them right in there, and they are stored inside. And then, like at Thanksgiving or the end of the year, Christmas maybe, you can take this down and take the back off and pull out all of those answered prayers, and you can go over them and see all of those prayers that were answered over the year, and just will help remind you and your family about the goodness of God. So I just really like how this turned out. So let's jump in and I'll show you how I made it. To make this, you will need two 8x10 picture frames from Dollar Tree, some spray paint. I'm also using some darker paint to dry brush and a sealer to help make sure everything's sealed well. And then I'll be using some jute twine, some tumbling tower blocks, and some of these mini clothespins. I'll also be using some wood glue, some E6000, and my hot glue gun with some Gorilla Glue sticks in it. First I'm going to take my wood glue and I'm just going to glue 4 of the tumbling tower blocks together so that they look like this. Then I'm going to take apart one of my picture frames. I'm just going to remove the back and take out the cardboard and the mat that is inside, and I'll be setting all of those things aside, and all I'll be using is the frame and the glass. Then I'm just going to press down the little tab so that holds the glass in, and it doesn't matter if they show from the front because you won't be seeing that anyway. Then I'm going to take my glue gun and I'm just going to add a little bit of hot glue in the corners. Here I am just folding a couple pieces of paper in thirds, just little pieces of paper, and I'm going to glue them on the top corners of the frame. And these will act as spacers to make it a little bit easier to slide the papers in between the frame. Then I'm going to take my E6000 and I'm going to apply this. This is on the back side of the frame, and I'm just going to put it along the 2 sides and the bottom. I don't want to put any glue along the top of the frame because that's where we're going to leave it open so we can slide those papers in the top of the frame. Then I'm going to take my other frame and I'm just going to turn it upside down and glue it to the other frame that we just put the glue on, just the sides and the bottom. And then that will leave the top open, and with those spacers it's enough to slide your papers in between them so that they go into the frame. Once the glue is completely dry, then I'm just going to give my frame a couple of light coats of paint. It's better to do several light coats than one thick coat. It just comes out smoother. I'm also going to paint the 4 tumbling tower blocks that I glued together. Then I'm going to take my dark paint and a dry brush, and I'm going to dry brush the dark paint on really lightly. So I'm just putting some on my brush and then taking the excess off on a paper towel, and then I'm just brushing it along the edges of the frame, and the paint will stick to kind of the edges and corners. And then I'll also be brushing it across the center of the frame, and this just gives it an antiqued or a worn finish. And I'm also going to dry brush the little 4 tumbling tower blocks that I glued together and painted. I just used my word processor and I printed off the word pray, and then I cut that out, and I am using a pencil to go over the back of it. Basically the same technique that I used on that first project. I'm going to trace over the letters so that it transfers to the wood blocks, and then I can paint that design on, or paint that word on my blocks. And again, you could use a sticker or a decal, or create something with your Cricut or Silhouette to do this. This time I just decided to use some black craft paint and a small paintbrush and paint it on. And I made another one of those jute flowers, and then I am taking a piece of twine and I'm going to glue the end to the top left hand corner of my prayer board, and then I'll glue that flower over the top of that end. And then I'm going to stretch the jute twine over to the opposite side of the board and kind of zigzag it down the board to the bottom right hand corner, where I will secure it with some more glue. And then I'm going to attach my little prayer sign over the top of that end of the twine. And for my last step, I'm going to attach my little clothespins to the twine so that I can clip my prayer requests onto the board, and that will make it really easy to switch them out as I need to. This prayer board was part of a series that I did that was a modular mail center that I put in our hallway. I will link that playlist in the card above if you want to check out how I created this. And remember to check out the playlist for the In His Name collab with all of the other creators to see all of the inspirational pieces that they have made as part of this collaboration. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up and let me know in the comments which project was your favorite. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you all have a blessed day.